makes a good living, but still struggles with the high cost of housing. She could rent a cheaper place farther from work and commute 2 hours every day. Or she could live near her job, but would need roommates to afford it. See, California has a housing shortage, and it's causing an affordability crisis that affects Gabriella, as well as millions of Californians who have been pushed into poverty, substandard housing, and homelessness. The truth is, California's housing shortage is no accident. It's the direct result of decades of bad policy, including racist, discriminatory practices like redlining, and laws that make it illegal to build more homes in our cities. A small but vocal and politically powerful group of residents defends these laws. But the Yes in My Backyard movement is determined to end the housing shortage by undoing our history of bad housing policies and making it legal to build more multifamily homes in our cities, so more Californians like Gabriella can afford to live where they want, close to jobs, good schools, public transportation, and walkable neighborhoods. Learn more about the YIMBY movement and our work to make California more affordable and equitable for everyone. This is Michael, and this is Michael's grandma, Iris. Iris is retired and lives on a fixed income. Michael has a good job, but both of them are struggling to find homes they can afford in their neighborhood. In California, most cities have made it illegal to build more homes on 75% of their land. While our population is growing, our supply of new homes can't keep up. That means older, naturally affordable homes are sold to the highest bidder, and Michael is out of luck. Meanwhile, Iris is on a 5-year wait list for subsidized housing like many Californians, including a growing number of people like Michael who wouldn't need subsidies if California cities made it legal to build more homes. California YIMBY is working to end the housing shortage for people of all incomes. When we legalize homes for everyone, we create more opportunities for home ownership for middle-income workers and give Michael a shot at owning his own naturally affordable home, while also helping Iris find subsidized affordable housing that suits her needs without waiting 5 years. By saying yes in my backyard to more homes, we can end the affordability crisis for all Californians. California has a housing shortage and affordability crisis. Too many of our cities have made it illegal to build more homes, so people like Gabriella are forced to live far from their jobs and local services and spend hours every day stuck in traffic. All that driving and gridlock means we end up with more air pollution that makes people sick. In California, air pollution disproportionately impacts communities of color, and Wanda and her family are suffering because of it. In fact, cars and trucks are the largest source of climate pollution in California. That means that the climate crisis is getting worse because of the housing crisis. In addition to all the pollution, high housing costs push Californians to live in areas at high risk of dangerous wildfires. Because of climate change, these fires grow larger every year, putting more communities at risk and leaving Californians like Adrian without a place to live. The YIMBY movement is working to make it legal to build more multifamily homes in our cities. When we say yes to more homes near good jobs, transit, and walkable neighborhoods, we help Californians spend less time stuck in traffic and more time with their families while reducing the pollution that hurts both people and the planet. In order to solve the climate crisis, we have to solve the housing crisis by saying yes in my backyard to more homes. Meet Gabriella. She makes a good living, but still struggles with the high cost of housing. She could rent a cheaper place farther from work and commute 2 hours every day. Or she could live near her job, but would need roommates to afford it. See, California has a housing shortage, and it's causing an affordability crisis that affects Gabriella, as well as millions of Californians who have been pushed into poverty, substandard housing, and homelessness. The truth is, California's housing shortage is no accident. It's the direct result of decades of bad policy, including racist, discriminatory practices like redlining, and laws that make it illegal to build more homes in our cities. A small but vocal and politically powerful group of residents defends these laws. But the Yes in My Backyard movement is determined to end the housing shortage by undoing our history of bad housing policies and making it legal to build more multifamily homes in our cities. So more Californians like Gabriella can afford to live where they want, close to jobs, good schools, public transportation, and walkable neighborhoods. Learn more about the YIMBY movement and our work to make California more affordable and equitable for everyone. This is Michael, and this is Michael's grandma, Iris. Iris is retired and lives on a fixed income. Michael has a good job, but both of them are struggling to find homes they can afford in their neighborhood. In California, most cities have made it illegal to build more homes on 75% of their land, while our population... California has a housing shortage.
Good afternoon. I'm the Reverend Dr. Betty Stapleford and the co-chair of CLU Ventura County. We're an interfaith network of people of diverse religious traditions who act in solidarity with struggling workers and families. I welcome you to an afternoon of exploring local housing issues, a first step, we hope, in committing all of us to work locally to alleviate the crisis. The plan for this afternoon is, I think it's always good to have a plan, in the first part to hear an overview of where we are regarding housing, and then we'll hear some stories of the varied experiences of people struggling to stay housed. It's not strictly about being unhoused. It's how to keep people from getting to that point. So we need to figure out some ways to be able to take care of ourselves and others before it gets harder. As is our interfaith tradition, we will open with a blessing. And now I call on Pastor Benjamin Thomas, pastor of Bethel AME Church, our host for this afternoon. Pastor Ben is also a CLU board member. So, Pastor Ben.
Good afternoon. We are so excited that you are here in this Affordable Housing Summit for Ventura County. And on behalf of myself and my first crew, all of us that I have in my family, and on behalf of the Bethel officers and members, we welcome you here to the place that we call the Lighthouse by the Shore. We pray that you feel our loving presence as you came into our doors. And so we're going to open up this meeting with a blessing. Oh, Father, our Creator, we pray that you would just continue to put on our hearts the need to see everyone housed in a way that they can afford. So, Creator, we pray that you would help us ignite the fire to become an advocate, to speak out, and to continue to push for more affordable housing here in our community. Amen. I'll now turn it over to Sister Betty, Reverend Betty again.
Whatever. Thank you, Pastor Ben. And I'd now like to introduce Cynthia Jones Campbell, a leader in social justice ministries at Padre Sarah Catholic Church, and also a CLU board member. Cynthia. And I'll be sure to hand you the microphone.
Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon. So I hope that you have a electronic device with you, the smartphone. So why don't we start by taking out our smartphones? Okay. Yes, because one of the things that we want to do is to actually have a poll. And in order to participate in the poll, you need a smartphone. So I already see that people are ahead of me. They're taking out their smartphones and taking a picture of the QR code. If you don't want to do the QR code, you can actually go to slido.com, and particularly for those who are watching online. So you can go to slido.com, and once you go to slido.com, you can enter the participant code, which is 1124611. Okay? And if everyone here is actually in Slido already, we're going to start with our very first question. And our question is, how affected are you by the lack of affordable housing in Ventura County? And you have 4 choices. Sure. I will defer that to Reverend Benjamin. Do you have cellular service allow you to get to the? Okay. Reverend Benjamin will actually assist you if you need Wi-Fi assistance. But also, if you have cellular service, you should be able to get to slido.com. Is anyone else having any trouble? Okay. Yes, and you will be able to actually view the responses as well, and the percentage, which I don't have my computer or my phone in front of me, so so I may have to borrow Reverend Melissa's.
68% are struggling, 28% are worried, 24% are not affected personally, and 24% struggling. 68% are struggling, are concerned about community members who are struggling.
Thank you, and that is actually Tim Hilton, who is also a CLU board member. And so Tim is our tech person, so between the two of us and Reverend Benjamin, we will answer any of the tech questions you have. Thank you. Okay. All right. I will turn this back over to Reverend Betty.
Thank you. And thank you, Cynthia. As we move ahead, as we listen to our speakers, questions may arise. Those of you who are at home somewhere, please put your questions on the Facebook chat. And those of you who are here in the church will receive index cards on which to write your questions. So could we have the index card distribution? And if you ask a question, please be sure to attach your email address, because we want to be sure that if we don't get a chance to answer some of those questions here today, because we thought we had all kinds of time, and then when we started timing things out, it turned out we didn't have as much time as we thought. So we want to be able to answer your questions, even though we may not get to that during the event today. Okay, is everybody in here got a card? I think our card distributor is engaged in some other activity at this point. Okay, while that's happening, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, who will address the big picture of what the housing crisis looks like in Ventura County. So Maria Navarro works as a housing policy advocate at CAUSE and is a part of the Ventura County Housing Coalition. This new coalition emerged to create county-wide space where coalition members could share information, advocate for pro-housing policies, and promote community engagement with housing challenges and solutions. Maria is an immigrant from Barranquilla, Colombia, and a 20-year resident of Oxnard, Port Hueneme. So, Maria, would you please come forward? Thank you so much.
Settled here for a little bit. All right. Sorry about that. So thank you all for having me here today to speak about this very important topic regarding our housing situation here in Ventura County. First of all, I would like to say that this housing, I don't want to call it a situation, I want to call it a crisis. This housing crisis is daunting, and it affects every single one of us personally. I think, I know that, in the poll it said that a good amount of people aren't personally affected, but I do think that personally it affects all of us because it affects the fiber of our community. The people who work and who live here, who are low-income earners, are really struggling to stay here. And so I'm gonna give you just a picture on a presentation about the big picture, okay? And, the community here in Oxnard is a very special community. The community here in Ventura County is a special community made up of immigrants. And I do want to say that there are two things I want to talk about, right? Just basically housing in Ventura County and also the impact, right, of what we're looking at. And I'm not sure if the PowerPoint, yay. Thank you. Okay, yes. And then if you could go to the third slide. And then one more. So when we're looking at housing, I want us to think about the housing stock, right? Basically, how many houses we have here. And then we want to talk about the financial aspect of it as well as the structural aspect of it. When I say financial aspect, I mean who can afford it? How much does it cost, right? And the structural part being, what is out here? Like, what type of housing do we see structurally around us, right? And so first, before I go on to the next slide, I want to ask you to think about when you bought your first house, or if you had the privilege to do so, how much it cost you, and how much of your income went into that house. The next slide is going to show you what is the median home price right now in Oxnard. And it's $705,000. This I got information from Zillow, but the census also says the same thing. If people could give me like even more accurate numbers, that would be great. But I know that this is the actual. I mean, I've been home buying with my brother 2 years ago, and it was this much. But it was, it's a lot. If I wanted, or if anyone here wanted to buy this home, right, you'd first have to if you wanted a conventional loan, like a lot of people do, we'd have to put a 5% down payment, sorry. That's $35,000, just right there out of pocket. And I don't know about you, but $35,000 for me, that's my college loans that I have, right? It's a lot of money, and that is a barrier for a lot of us. After that, let's say we do have $35,000. Let's say if I got some first homeowner assistance, which my brother and I did. I'll talk about that later. The interest rate right now is 6%. This means that when I ran these numbers into a mortgage calculator, I actually got that the monthly payments would be $4,750 a month. To qualify for a loan this size, you have to make about double that, right? because banks aren't going to give you a loan if you don't make enough money to pay for it. And to qualify, they're really looking at a combined income of maybe $9,000 a month to buy the median house in Oxnard. $9,000, I mean, I struggle to see who could afford this. Especially people who, especially in my generation, who really cannot come to this kind of income. And what this is creating really is that people who have been fortunate enough and have had the privilege to have generational wealth, they can often access homeownership. But it's actually bridging the gap where people who have not been given or haven't had the opportunity to create that generational wealth are further blocked from it because of these prices. And so, sorry about that. And so if you go into the next slide, we're going to talk about renting. Because, yeah, we can't own a house, and next is renting it out. So $2,218 a month is the fair market rent for a 2-bedroom apartment here in Ventura County. And depending on the city, it could be more or less, right? And so to put it into perspective, a person would have to pay less than 30% of their monthly income on rent, they would have to earn $42.65 an hour. 2 full-time employees who get paid minimum wage would have to spend 46% of their gross income every month on rent. This is before taxes. And this leads me to the question, so how much money should we pay for housing? And I know I threw out a 30% in there. I know I've thrown out like a 50% in there, but really, how much should we pay? And if we go to the next slide, HUD, right, has talked about cost burden, and that's how we define affordable housing. An affordable housing is a house or a mortgage or a rent payment that doesn't surpass 30% of your monthly income. Now, 38.6% of homeowners who have a mortgage are cost burden. That means they pay more than 30% of their income on a mortgage. And 55.4% of renters are cost burden. That is huge. What's more worrying about this is that people who are in the extremely low income categories, the people who really aren't making much money, families who are in the very low income categories, you could tell by that little graph, they are more likely to be extremely cost burdened. That means they pay more than 50% of their income. 74% of families in the very low income category pay more than 50% of their income, monthly income on rent. And I want that to sink in a little. I mean, having to pay that much money, more than 50% on your income on just a place where you can sleep at night, that's a lot. And it doesn't really leave room for anything, any emergency, any kind of unprecedented event, whether your car's towed or anything, you're done. That's your income for the month, right? So we hear a lot about the need for affordable housing, and of course there's a need. But we hear in the news like people are building affordable housing. There are groups out there that are building it. Oxnard has been really good in the last couple of years of building affordable housing. We have subsidies like Section 8. But why is this problem getting worse? And I want to let you know that it's not necessarily because we're not doing anything, it's because of the scale of the problem. And would you believe me if, okay, and with the scale, I mean, like if it was only 10%, 20%, or 25% of our households that needed affordable housing, maybe we would have enough. But we have, right here in Oxnard, most families in Oxnard actually are low income, qualify for low income housing. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that is a chart of the affordability income level. So if you see Ventura County, the area median income is $115,000 for a family of 4. That means that a low income family that means people who could qualify for low-income housing, they're actually they have to earn less than $100,000, a family of 4. This is the county, right? The Ventura median is 83,180. That means that most of Oxnard, the city of Oxnard residents or households, fall below the low-income category. And in other words, that means that there's at least 25,000 households in Oxnard who would qualify for low-income housing. And this just means we might construct 1,000, 2,000 units of affordable housing every year. There might be thousands of Section 8 vouchers a year. But there is this huge gap of what we have and what we need, right? And let me go to the next slide and switch a little bit and go into the structure, right? So what types of homes do we have? And about 75% of our housing stock is single-family homes. And I am a fan, let me just do a disclaimer here. I like single-family homes. I'm not against single-family homes. I just think we should build more things than single-family homes. That's the disclaimer. But yeah, they were built before 1980, half of them. And 1980, not so old for a person, but it's getting older for a house. Having an aging housing stock just means that there's going to be a need for renovations. And if the home is left unattended, if there's not enough money for a person or a family to upkeep their aging housing, then it most likely will fall into despair. And it could end up getting out of the housing stock. So we also have to take into the calculation that every time we add in housing, there's also this group of older housing that's falling out, right? So we could add in a lot of housing, but there's also housing that's leaving this housing stock because it's aging. So let me put it another way, right? So let me bring these concepts together. So we have a growing population of people who can't afford to live here, and this is especially the low-income renters who cannot afford to live here. These are farm workers, immigrants, people of color, people with disabilities. We also have a population of folks who cannot move out of their current home. And this is, even if they would like to, right, because they can't afford, and that is like young professionals, to maybe people in my generation, and the next generation, right? And at the other end of the spectrum, seniors who are on a fixed income and can't move out. Maybe they want to leave, right? Their home, they have like maybe 4-bedroom house, and now they're empty nesters, and they can't leave because they're on a fixed income. So I wanted to take you through, and actually I'm going to time check myself real quick. Cynthia? Okay. So basically what I wanted to say is that I wanted to take you through a series of different, of like a town, right, in the US. Can I get the next slide, please, Cynthia? Gracias. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's say, and because I'm a history major, I like history. And I like maps. And so let's say this was a town, and I hope the next person is going to talk about this too, thank you. Simple town in the 1930s. Let's say this was 1930s, Oxnard. The green area is the town. The gray squares are the commercial centers, and the red squares are the industrial centers. A town used to be a series of places, what sprung up as a series of places that naturally was put in there because there was industry, because there was agriculture. The little square onto the far right is agricultural land, and it was outside of the city. What ended up happening? If we go, can I get the next slide, please? If we go 30 years in the future, what we ended up doing is, for various reasons that I hope are explained later, we started building a lot of single-family homes. We started building a lot of suburbs, usually because of subsidies. And so what we got here is we had annexed all of the land that was agricultural before, and we created zoning for single-family homes. And we created strip malls to go along with our single-family homes, and so people could drive their cars from inside, right, their house to outside to the strip mall or to downtown and get their needs. This is how we addressed a growing population. And if I could get the next slide, Cynthia. Then, let's say in the 1990s, right? We got into a point where we ran out of land, and we were like, okay, there's traffic. There's more housing now than there was before. People were complaining about traffic, about the strip mall. They didn't want to build more in their existing territory. So in the 90s, there was maybe this discussion of like, should we build more multifamily, more denser housing in our existing territory? Or what should we do? And so what we ended up doing is, Cynthia, can I get the next slide? We ended up actually solving this problem by not doing anything different. We just annexed new land. So we took what we had already done by an annexed new land, we zoned it single family home again, and this created a very, very simple solution for a very complicated problem. And so, Cynthia, next slide. So what do we have now, 30 years later? Well, lo and behold, the housing got filled up again. And again, with single-family homes. And again, I'm not against single-family homes. I'm just against the fact that we have to build single-family homes. And that newer housing, let's say this is Oxnard in the north end, it's now filled up again, right? We still have this need for housing, but there's no room to put it. And we just keep doing the same thing. We just keep grabbing land, annexing it, and then just doing the same cycle again. Why don't we do something different? That is a great question. It's a good question, actually, and I think that's the discussion, I think, right now. But anyway, what has this created, right? This is the whole point, is that this has created, Cynthia, next slide. It's created a big impact, and by that I mean our housing shortage. And next slide again. We're 31,000 units short here in Ventura County. That's 11% of our housing stock. We need more of it, right? We have been reported, NPR reported, that we're the largest shortage in the nation. Not by the amount, but normalized as in like per capita. We're like the largest housing shortage in the whole nation, with 11% of our housing supply basically missing. And so this has created a bunch of health impacts. And Cynthia, last slide, please. Basically, the housing shortage has created skyrocketing market rate prices, pricing out of low-income families, overcrowding, increase in homelessness, because homelessness and homelessness and rent prices are correlated. The higher the rent prices are, the more homelessness there's going to be because people cannot pay to be in housing. Furthering of the wealth gap through home ownership, right? Expensive, and then just it being expensive to build housing. Even it's expensive. Affordable housing is so expensive to build nowadays that it was reported, an LA Times article said that it was more, or was it San Francisco, more than $1 million a unit to build affordable housing. It's just getting very expensive to build. Their development style, or that urban planning example that I just showed you about the cities, what has that created, right? Because they're two concepts, but they're very interconnected. How we build our cities and where we live are very interconnected. The development style has led to car development community, which has in itself environmental impacts. Our cars are a big source of pollution in our environment. But it also has mental and physical impacts. We live in a world of isolation, and we're isolated pretty much by design, because we designed ourselves into being isolated, because we go from our house to our car, we sit in traffic, we then go to the store, we then come back home, all of it in our car in our little bubbles, right? We have the physical impact of not being able to just walk. That's the healthiest thing you could do as a human, walk. We are, a lot of money, because of this development style, is going through improvements in streets, gas lines, water sewage lines, because every time we annex and just get more land and grab more land, well, guess what? All the improvements have to be there. There has to be streets, new gas lines, everything. So we raise up our taxes, and we continue bond measures. And so I'm going to leave it off there, but I think that this is probably the biggest issue for probably our next century to come, Thank you.
And don't go away. You are actually kicking off the next part of our program because we understand that you have a story of your own to tell about this. So we'll start we'll have a series of stories by people who are actually facing these issues. And Maria will begin that. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, so I put in that I was struggling to pay my mortgage. My brother and I am not wealthy at all. And my brother and we graduated, I say we because we're twins. We graduated in 2016 from university, and after that, he was very privileged and lucky to get a job in PennyMac, which is a company in Westlake. I don't know, one of the richer parts. I don't know. Well, he is financially stable, which is a blessing because we've never had that before. But I definitely was not. I was a Peace Corps volunteer for a little bit. But we used our savings in the pandemics. We were talking about maybe buying a house. And so we were able to scrounge up $22,000. That was enough for a down payment. My brother basically, to do this, he lived at home until basically 27 years old to be able to save up all that money. And I contributed like some $7,000 or $8,000. We had to look. It was a weird time going home buying in the pandemic. We had to look everywhere. We tried looking at single-family homes. None of it. We only had a line. And by that time, I was now working as a professional, like a cause, right? So we had 2 solid incomes. We only got a cap of $500,000. That was our loan. And so, obviously, yeah, no single-family homes. There's no way we could buy that. But, we've always lived in apartments our whole life, so we didn't think twice to, look at condos or townhouses. We finally got a condo. This condo is 970 square feet. It has 2 bathrooms. My room is probably, I don't know, like small. It's like a closet small. And we were lucky to have 2 bathrooms, but that condo cost us $395,000 with an HOA of $700 a month. I know. So once all said and done, we pay around $2,800 a month for our small home. It's a blessing, of course. We enjoy it. But it's still a lot of our income. I think him and I, we struggle, but we do put ourselves at 30% of our housing income goes into our mortgage. But it wouldn't have happened. You can't do it alone. You literally cannot. You have to team up with someone to buy a house. You have to team up with your family or your significant other because there's no way to do it alone. And I know so many people who are out there, same age as us, young professionals who cannot. We're one of the only ones who own a house, really. Other people haven't been able to do it. So, thank you.
So thank you so much, Maria. And we will now see, and just for everybody who's speaking, and I have to remind myself, this microphone is directional, so you actually need to hold it kind of in front of your face like this, as though you're getting ready to lick the ice cream cone. So once it goes down here, you can see the difference. So now we have a film, a recording of man, I started to say young man, everybody's young to me, but in any case, a young man named Charlie. And so we will hear his story that on the screens up above, and then have an opportunity Charlie is actually here today, but we're going to hear his story on the video. So, thank you.
Will? With or without my glasses on?
Well, thank you for your business.
I'm willing to help anybody that's
was your living situation before you came to Many Mansions?
I was living on the streets. I went as far north as Eureka, California, staying with friends, a lot of sofa surfing as they call it. And I went out to Vacaville, California, which is right outside of Sacramento, stayed with some friends there, and then I finally ended up in Kern County. And when I was in Kern County, I went to, there in Bakersfield, I went to the senior center, and then they told me, well, we have a little facility here, but you got to get there early if you want a bed. If you're late, you're back on the streets. So
that was a shelter?
It was a shelter.
Yeah.
And it's crazy that yesterday was Christmas. I was thinking of Christmas 2018. My Christmas and Thanksgiving dinner was eaten out of a trash can. Thought that was pretty bad for being a veteran.
Yeah. How did you find Many Mansions? How did they find you?
Back in 2017, the Veteran Service Support from Santa Barbara's Salvation Army came to my house and said, Charlie, look, we have this new place that's going to be opening up, and would we like to know if you'd like to get on our list?
And you said came to your house, so where were you living?
I was living in my folks' house there in Ventura, house I lived in for 57 years. Mm-hmm. The bank, after my father died, I don't make enough to keep the payments, and I tried to work with the bank. They didn't want to hear no boohoo story. All they were interested in money. Took me to court, had me foreclosed on. When I left the courthouse, ma'am, I had no idea where I was going or what I was going to do. My whole life had changed. The split of a judge's hammer, hitting that gavel. And so I said, okay, Charlie, use your head, don't go crazy. So they gave me 5 days to empty a house of 57 years. The treasures that I had to get rid of, because if it didn't fit in my pocket, and if it didn't fit in my car, or if it didn't fit in a storage container, it was gone.
So how soon after that did you connect with Many Mansions?
Many Mansions got a hold of me on January 19th of 2019 and said, Charlie, you got 3 hours to get into this window if you want to get into Many Mansions. I don't know anything about computers. I found a friend there in Bakersfield. She took me to Bakersfield College and to the library and started doing magic on that and got me in.
Wow, nice. So once you signed up with Many Mansions, how long did it take before you got housing here?
9 months.
9 months.
And got all my P's and Q's, dotted the I's, crossed the T's, and everything went right along, and they told me, okay, we're ready to accept you in here. And that was the first person to move in.
So I understand there are like 44 units.
There's 40 units.
At Ormond Beach Villas.
Yes.
That's where we are on South Saviors Road, on Saviors Road in Oxnard.
Yes, ma'am.
It's really lovely here. I see the mural behind you.
Yes, that was put in when they were building this place, and it was autistic adults that did all the murals on here. And then we have a playground for it, because we do have some families with children, because this place is strictly for low-income veterans and low-income veterans with families.
Oh, there are activities here for you?
Yes, ma'am. Once a month, they'll have a little get-together here. I myself had started a coffee class. I hope
very interesting hearing your story.
my story will influence others into seeking help, because there are a lot of agencies. Once I got here, I heard about the Agency of the Aged from Ventura County. I got in a food share program, a senior food nutrition program where they deliver groceries to me.
Are there helpers on site here? Any kind of?
Yes, we have, of course,
manager?
we have a case manager. I don't know the time, COC and CC, all Greek to me, but found out one is for residents and like myself, and the other one is for residents with families. And then we, of course, we have a property manager. One of the things that for veterans, you don't have to live on the streets. There are agencies that will help you, but a lot of veterans don't want this because they don't want to live. They want to live a freedom. Well, I'd taking orders and having a nice, safe place to live than living on the streets again.
Yeah. How long have you been living here?
I've been here now 3 years.
And how are you doing?
I am doing excellent, ma'am. Every day I thank the Lord and say I have a safe place to go.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for that.
Much for sharing so openly with us. We really appreciate it very much. And now I'd like to introduce Sue Brinkmeyer to speak with us. She's been an advocate working to increase the availability of affordable housing and to reduce homelessness in Ventura County. She's here to speak with us today about her experience as president of Ventura Homeless Prevention. Sue?
Thank you. So we at Ventura Homeless Prevention pay rent to keep people who live in the city of Ventura in their homes when they're facing eviction because of a one-time problem that's short-term, and they've fixed it. So if we pay their rent this one time, they'll be fine going forward. So what does the housing crisis look like for them? From my perspective, it looks like a daily struggle to pay their bills and feed their kids after they've paid their rent, because the people that we work with pay on average 44% of their income in rent. Some pay 50, 60, 70%, and we know that economists recommend paying no more than 30%. And that's because if you only pay 30%, then after you pay your bills, you have some money to put in savings for a rainy day. A recent study by an economist at Zillow found that homelessness spikes in a region when people are paying on average just 32% of their income. It doesn't have to go up much over that recommended 30. The correlation between homelessness and housing costs is exact. When too many people lose their housing because they can't afford it, homelessness increases, as it has been doing here in Ventura County. It grew by more than 25% in the last 2 years. And the same is true we see in Los Angeles, where an article in the Atlantic magazine said this month that they actually house 207 people a day, take them out of homelessness. Unfortunately, 227 people a day become homeless. So, losing battle, right? It's going up by 10% from that alone. And the risk of homelessness is most acute in places like Ventura County with low vacancy rates and a lack of affordable housing. Our clients, who manage to pay their bills and stay housed each month but can't put anything by for a rainy day, find themselves facing eviction simply because they got sick and missed a few hours, few days of work, or they had a fight with a roommate and he or she, or a spouse, and they moved out. or they had a big doctor bill or a big car repair bill. Doesn't take very much when you've not been able to put money aside. We got a call this week from a father of 5 who found himself, is very, very worried that he is going to be homeless, facing eviction. He can't pay his rent because of the rain. Put money aside for a rainy day. He paints houses for a living, the outside of houses, and he hasn't been able to do that for 9 days out of the past 6 weeks. And more rain is expected. He is very worried that he, his wife, and his 5 children are going to be on the streets. So what does it look like if you're struggling to pay rent every single day? It looks like a disaster waiting to happen, with eviction and homelessness potentially just one life problem away.
Thank you, Sue. Next, we'd like to invite Barbara Macri-Ortiz. She is an attorney in private practice. Is she here? I don't see Barbara, but I was hoping that maybe it was my vision. Nope, okay, so I guess we'll go on to, and hopefully Barbara will arrive at some point and we'll be able to have that conversation. So next, we have Gabrielle Vignon, who is the Executive Director of House Farm Workers, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her experience with housing and farm workers. Thank you very much, Gabrielle.
Hi, everyone. I hope I'm holding this correctly. So I'm going to share with you a personal story and then also some personal stories from children of farm workers. So I lived pretty comfortably growing up, and as an adult, when my relationship ended, I became a single mom of 3 in my early 20s. And when that happened, my housing changed. And when my housing changed, I couldn't afford housing on my own. I got pitch-ins from my mother, from local programs, and we moved to Ventura County for cheaper rent. It turned out Ventura County rent was not cheaper. So I was working full-time. I did recycling to get extra money. I got an extra job to get extra money. I used local programs such as Community Action, Catholic Charities, Project Understanding, and different food banks. I got a second job. I used a student loan to purchase a couch. I used credit cards to buy the kids' clothes. And at that time, unlike Maria's presentation, but at that time, when I was younger, the prices of housing was different. And it was actually cheaper to pay a mortgage than it was to pay rent. So I thought the solution would be that I should buy a home. So I went to a local program, VCCDC, and I asked about what I would need to do to purchase a home. Their advice was to better my credit, to save up money, and to lower my expenses, and my biggest one was rent. And I asked, how do you do that? How do you not pay so much rent? And their answer was to get into affordable housing. So I went to affordable housing and I applied. And I was actually too low income for low income housing, which is something that can happen. You can have too much income and not qualify for low income housing, but you can also have too little. So what I did instead was get a job for the company where I applied for the housing where I was denied. And I became a property manager, which gave me free housing. And I was able to save money that way, pay off some debt, and it really did change our lives. It also changed my life in that I met other families in the same situation, other families that I had to try and help qualify. And I saw reasons why they couldn't qualify. It might be one little thing for them as well. I also saw file cabinets filled with waitlist applications of families who were still waiting to get that help. I saw numerous people get houses for the first time, people that were living in cars, people that were living in hotels, people that were living in shared spaces. The last family that I helped get into an apartment, which looked like a beautiful home, had never had a house before. And they lit up when we walked their new three-bedroom, two-bath apartment. They had no furniture for it because they never had a space that big. And I saw the community that I live in gather together and pitch in, donating couches, beds, dishes from their own units. It was beautiful. Affordable housing affects how we do in school, in health, and in life. I work with farm workers. I have families and friends that are farm workers, and I have the privilege to work for our farm workers in Ventura County. So I'm going to share just one fact, but up front there's also this fact sheet if you need it. So 52% of Ventura residents are paying more than 30% of their income on housing. Farm workers' average income is $31,737. The average income needed to afford just a two-bedroom apartment is over $81,000. So our farm workers are falling very short. So now I'm also going to share some quotes with you from children of farm workers. And these children of farm workers do apply for our scholarship application every year. So 3 applicants. The first one said, living in California lately has not been kind. Gas prices have risen, groceries have inflated, and housing has doubled in the last 2 years. Another applicant says, my dad's dream is to buy a home of his own and to move to a safe neighborhood. Thus, he takes long hours at work to make that happen. His stress and his worries, along with my mother's, would be lessened if we lived in affordable housing and had a safe housing environment. The last one says, the apartments that I reside in have completely changed my life and have allowed me to become successful. My living situation prior consisted of 1 bedroom and 1 bathroom studio. At that time, the studio was the most we could afford. And in order to be able to get my school assignments done, I would have to do them in the bathroom because that was the only place with the least amount of noise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gabrielle. So, I'm not sure whether I really want to tell you this or not, but we're going to have a 5-minute break, but not yet. So, we'd like to do another Slido audience poll. So, Cynthia, would you come up and lead us through that process? And then, if you're really, really good, we'll have a 5-minute break.
Thank you. All right, so I think we know the routine. So if you would actually take a photo of the QR code, and for those online, if you need to, go to slido.com if you didn't keep it in your browser, and enter the code 1124611. So our question is, what have you heard so far that has affected your thinking about the housing crisis in Ventura County? They're great responses. So one of the responses that I see is the vacancy rate is contributing to the housing crisis. Not affordable. Rent and mortgages are unaffordable. Our governments need to build more affordable housing. Is that possible? Unaffordable, serious crisis. The statistics are terrible for too many people. There are many obstacles to overcome. The scale of the issue is much greater than I had previously understood. Also, we need to change how we design and plan our planning communities, our living environments. I did not know an income, there's moving too fast, could be too low in order to receive certain help. There are lots of people in our country who cannot afford housing, highest of most counties in California. It confirms my thoughts of the issues involved in our country's housing crisis. There are many. So thus far, there are still answers coming in. Okay. I'm just going to give it just a couple more seconds. There are no easy answers. All right, looks like I don't have any more answers coming in. There are 29 participants. And definitely feel free to respond if you have time later. And we're going to take a break now. Give this to Betty.
So now we're going to have a break because you were so good. And I want to emphasize 5 minutes. I know that sounds like a short time. There are bathrooms close by. Please be back here in 5 minutes. Okay, check your watches now. Go.
I'm wondering if she's working with anyone.
Okay, please start heading back to your seats. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We'll be addressing your questions after the next speaker, so please, if you have something you want to ask, be sure you write it on your card, or if you're a person at home, if you turn it in, put it on the Facebook chat so that we can get to those. Our next speaker will explain how we got to the housing crisis we're in. That's not a simple question to answer, but here's a man who could do it. So I am wanting to introduce you to Rick Schrader. He's the president of Many Mansions, a nonprofit affordable housing and service community, and a provider. And Rick has led Many Mansions for the last 21 years. So welcome, Rick.
Thank you, Betty. I don't think I have all the answers, certainly, but I will give you some of the reasons. Many Mansions is a nonprofit affordable housing and service provider, and we develop affordable renting housing throughout Ventura County and Los Angeles County. We are the largest developer and operator of supportive housing. That's this affordable housing specifically for those individuals and families who are homeless. I do want to also acknowledge Charlie as one of our residents of our Ormond Beach Villas apartment, which is affordable housing for veterans here in Ventura County. Slide, please. And the next slide. Well, as you've heard, 31,000 units in Ventura County are needed. We are short 31,000 units. And why is that? What are the reasons for that? What are the causes for that? Well, many factors contribute to this lack of affordable housing in Southern California and Ventura County. And I will just focus on 4 of them. 1, SOAR, which is unique to Ventura County. 2, racism, which encompasses many different things: redlining, restrictive zoning, racial covenants, denials of projects. 3, NIMBYism, not in our backyard. And 4, just the general high cost and extensive time it takes to develop affordable housing. Now, these factors have existed for many years, and they all relate to each other. And they still persist. But I'm actually optimistic that we are making some progress in these areas, so I do want to give you some hope. Next slide, please. SOAR. SOAR stands for Save Open Space and Agricultural Resources. Now, this is unique to Ventura County, but it's somewhat emblematic of the general restriction on the amount of land that's available to develop affordable housing. But the idea behind SOAR is to protect the agricultural land in Ventura County. Agricultural industry is one of our largest employers and one of our largest businesses in this county. So the desire was to protect that from further housing and commercial development. But it is a problem, and it's a problem that is a factor in why there's not as much of affordable housing as there should be. By restricting development, and you can sort of see the map on my slide, most of the land in Ventura County is restricted. By restricting development to those areas within cities, you're restricting the available land to develop and build new affordable housing. Restricting supply, of course, means the price goes up. Our last affordable housing development, where we paid for land, cost $3 million an acre. $3 million an acre just for the land, and as I'll get a little bit later, all the other costs associated with development of housing. In addition, SOAR forces developments within cities, and that's where you also start to get restricted zoning, requirements of lower densities, NIMBYism, all these other factors that I'll talk about. So by restricting the land that's available, we are concentrating it into a certain area, which creates less supply, increases the cost, and one of the factors for a lack of affordable housing. Next slide. Racism. There's been lots of discussion on racism over the last several years, and especially how it affects the lack of affordable housing. And I do want to recommend two books that really talk about this quite extensively. One is The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein, and the other is Evicted by Matthew Desmond. And both books tackle the issues of racism in different ways, but really discuss how that interplays and how that affects affordable housing and the effect upon many lives. In The Color of Law, especially, the author talks about redlining. Now, most of you know about redlining, where certain financial institutions or insurance companies would restrict what mortgages that they would issue to certain areas and to certain people. But redlining also restricted apartment construction as well. That in fact, as outlined in The Color of Law, the government was part of this. The government in the 1940s and 50s and 60s actually, through affordable housing development programs, restricted what projects that they would develop based on who was going to live there. So for African American communities, they would often not fund or agree to fund or guarantee projects specifically for that population. Housing authorities, not in Ventura County necessarily, but housing authorities throughout the country would often restrict who could be on their waiting list to certain populations and not allow African Americans or others to be even in public housing. And again, these are things that happened a long time ago, but the legacy, the effect of that keeps playing out generation after generation. And indeed, in the book Evicted, here the author talked about and really went and looked at the housing, the rental market in the city of Milwaukee. Again, Milwaukee is different than Ventura County, but many of the same things do apply. And he came upon a strange thing, that in low-income, predominantly black areas, the rents were actually higher than the rest of Milwaukee in the white areas. Now, why was that? Again, through racism, restricting the amount of available housing, supply and demand, resulted in higher rents for communities that least could afford it. Again, that's the legacy of racism. And we have seen that. Many mansions has seen that. We've looked at a lot of affordable housing or existing apartment complexes and are astounded by the high rents that are being charged for those places. Zoning, of course, is often subject to underlying racism. Why are projects not denied or not approved? Why are zonings? Why is zoning? Why do we restrict to very low density? Again, sometimes the feeling that public officials don't want certain populations to be living in apartments. And indeed, just having zoning that restricts where you can build apartments is part of that. What projects are approved. Section 8, many landlords, I think most of you know the Section 8 program, allows people with their Section 8 voucher, they can live anywhere. But many landlords do not accept Section 8 vouchers. Again, that's a legacy sometimes of racism. Next slide. This all plays into NIMBYism. Not in my backyard. And here, I think we've seen some progress, hopefully. But I want to give you just two very brief stories. Thomas Terrace and Avenida Simi. These were two many mansions projects that we had to cancel because of NIMBYism. Thomas Terrace was a project in the city of Thousand Oaks. It was going to be 60 or 70 units of senior housing on Hillcrest Drive. Very nice project. Senior housing, very needed, very necessary. And yet the neighbors all came out and protested it. This is senior housing, because they didn't want more affordable housing in that particular area. So we did. Avenida Simi in Simi Valley was a very small apartment complex that we proposed, also senior housing, right next to the senior center. If you know where the government center is, the library, senior center, there's an empty lot, senior housing, perfect place for seniors. Nope, neighbors came out, protested that. One neighbor came out and said that he didn't want that type of housing because he knew that it would be, there would be so many cars there and traffic would be a nightmare. Again, this was like 25 units for seniors, most of them who would not have cars. Again, objections you hear all the time for projects. New affordable housing is going to create more crime, and property values are going to come down. Again, not true, and you can see on the slide, you can see that I cited a recent study that came out that actually refuted that. That actually showed that affordable housing development increased the property values nearby and also lowered crime. Lack of water. Well, that's true. More housing probably will use more water. But again, ignoring the fact that in affordable housing, we develop communities that use the latest water savings feature. Same with gas, same with electricity. Too much parking. Again, we generally build all of our apartment complexes to parking codes. That it's a government handout. Again, everybody at many mansions pays rent. Our residents pay about 30%, so it's affordable, but everyone does pay rent. That it's too tall, too high a density. Again, there's some truth on that. One of my favorite ones was an actually city council member who voted against our project and said that he did not want any more Section 8 welfare queens. Yeah, he actually said that. I think that was having to do with our senior housing. Next slide, please. And indeed, affordable housing does cost a lot to develop. I'll give you one example, a very quick example. Our Central Terrace project here in Oxnard, 6th Street and Meta. Under construction right now, it is 87 units under construction. It's going to be ready hopefully by the end of this year. But it does cost $41 million, which actually is relatively cheap in these days. It's only approximately $500,000 per unit. But of those costs, only about $22 million is actually devoted to construction. The rest of the costs have to do with all this other government stuff and interest and prevailing wage and legal and all this extra cost that we have to incur. But it does cost a lot. And from start to finish, it's going to take about 5 years, which is, again, actually relatively short. We've had some projects that are 7 and 8 years. So, in closing, many factors exist that drive up the cost of affordable housing. As a result, there's not as much of affordable housing as we need to. But I do think things are improving, and I think over the next couple of years, you're going to see a number of new affordable housing projects throughout Ventura County, which I think is going to help us. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Rick. And now the moment you've all been waiting for, questions. A chance to get some of your questions answered. And Cynthia, I think you've been following the questions online, so if you would come up and share some of those with us, and then we'll share the ones from... Excuse me? Does anyone have any questions that you haven't written down yet? Our woman on the spot is willing to come and collect them from you as we speak. Okay, great.
Thank you.
And we'll just ask the speakers if they want to volunteer to answer the questions, and or if they don't volunteer, we will pick someone.
All right, voluntold, okay. All right, so in monitoring the questions online, I only have one thus far. And the question is, what about shipping containers? Is this a viable option for affordable housing for all families?
Excellent question. We have looked into using shipping containers into construction. We have found that it's actually not a viable option. However, we do have a new project that's going to begin in just a couple months in Ventura County, where we're going to be using modular construction, where much of the housing part is built actually in a factory in Idaho, shipped here, and we put it together here. That will reduce the construction time from 18 months to 9 months, which does save money. So I think modular construction is probably the better way. Shipping containers for housing, there's too much else involved. But we're always looking for ways to reduce the cost, definitely.
Hi, I'm Nan Waltman, Klug Vice Chair. Co-chair. Sometimes I'm Vice Chair, right? Okay. So a number of the questions relate to the solutions. And the good news is we're going to have a little period at the end here that talks about some of the solutions. So whoever wrote that, you're right in the right place where we're going to address that. And here's one about what can be done about a property manager, landlord property, who keeps going up on the rent every 6 months. So, so now we're into issues of rent stabilization. Yes, yes, come Maria.
I'm no expert on this, but I was active in the rent stabilization push here in Oxnard, and there are a couple of things. So in the city of Oxnard, we do have rent stabilization, which means that your rent cannot go up more than 4%. But yeah, more than 4% a year. That could be split up into 2 6-month periods. That is fine, but it has to be 2% and then 2%, right? So if you're paying $1,800 a month, you're going to get an increase of $72 in total for the whole year. So you'll be paying $1,872 per month. And that's rent stabilization. Now, for the people who do not live in the city of Oxnard, there is a 10% gouging rent cap. So like year rent cannot go up more than 10% per year. And that could also be split up into 2 6 months. So That is state. And so there are two laws. There is AB 1482, that is the tenant protection statewide, that applies to apartment complexes, mainly, and some duplexes. And then there is the anti-gouging law that is now in effect until March of this year, that is statewide, and that one applies to every single rental housing, whether it's apartment or a single family home or anything else.
How can that be enforced?
Yeah, that's it. It's the $1 million question. It is, you have to tell the city. Really, you do. You have to either tell the city, ask a lawyer. If Barbara were here, she'd probably know a couple of lawyers, but I know for sure there's the Latino Bar Association who would probably be able to help out, or you could, the housing department probably, like if it's in the city of Oxnard, for sure, Emilio, who's our housing director, will look into that. Oh, yes, and CRLA, Rural Legal Assistance, yes, they will help you out as well.
Thank you, Maria. I also want to add that we had allowed 10 minutes for questions, so if there are any questions that we are not able to get to, we will respond to you via email or make sure that we communicate some type of way the responses to your questions. The next question, what do you think will address the national housing crisis?
Anyone?
It's an open question, it's pretty loaded. Yes.
This is a no-fault question answering. Nobody has to say this is absolutely what's going to happen. What do you think? Anybody?
Yes, anyone. Okay. Okay, so
The microphone again. But yes, I think one of the biggest things we could do right now is look into really our zoning laws and something called upzoning, which means like literally filling in. That's what California has been doing. So the state of California in the last couple of years has been trying to add in more density into our streets and our cities. And what we could do, if I didn't add it in my presentation, but I should have, if you see the zoning map for Oxnard, the city of Oxnard, you'll see that about 80 or 90% of it is, of the residential zoning is single family homes. You could bump that up a little bit more so that there could be duplexes and triplexes, or some things called accessory dwelling units. Those are actually legal everywhere. So you could build in your garage a little home for a person. There should be, now there's a difference between allowing something and something actually getting built, right? And that difference, and that big difference of whether something actually gets done or not, it has to do a lot with financing. So I feel like if the government were to get involved in financing these programs and allowing people to convert their garage or split their unit or do a duplex, whatever, that would help out a lot. It would help out a lot.
Thank you, Maria. Our next question, are there any programs in Ventura County specifically that look at housing for Blacks and African Americans, or are there future plans? We will research this and definitely get back to you on this. Do you have an update on affordable housing for the farm worker families in Camarillo?
I do not have an update for farm worker families in Camarillo. What I can tell you, which is part of the solutions I would give at the end, is each city has a housing element. And in those housing elements, there's room to put in programs for more farm worker housing. And that's something that we try to push for, is the creation of additional farm worker housing. If it's a very specific answer you're looking for, I can do a little bit more research and ask for an email to answer it at.
Is there an Oxnard homeless prevention plan similar to the Ventura homeless prevention?
As far as I know, no other city in the county has that program, but the county has a program. The problem with the county program is that it's limited to who it can serve based on income, based on immigration status, based on the type of housing they live in. So I think it needs to be everywhere.
Thank you, Sue. Unfortunately, I was just reminded of the time, which I said we had 10 minutes. So we're going to have to stop the Q&A at this time, but we will definitely make sure that you receive an answer to your questions. We will definitely make sure that you receive an answer to your questions. Yes.
Yeah, just be sure that we have your email so we can get those out.
And that includes the individuals online, because I sent out a little comment asking if there were any more questions. So when I go back to my computer, if I look and there are more questions, we'll make sure that you include your email address in your question. Thank you.
So now, actually, this is one of the questions that was just asked. So this is if any of the other experts, and we do have experts here today, have answers about how we might address the housing crisis in Ventura County. Something that maybe hasn't been shared yet. What are some things that, because one of the things that we want to encourage all of you here to do is find ways to get involved. And so what are some of the things that that can be done by agencies, but also what things can be done by people banding together? So Sue, you want to tell us something about that?
Yeah, I want to share a program that, again, exists in the city of Ventura called Homes for All. And that is an organization where all of the agencies that care about affordable housing come together, and then they lobby city council and the planning commission together like mad, and they get the houses of faith to sign letters and lobby and bring together citizens, put pressure on your elected officials who I'm sure want to do the right thing, but there's all that NIMBYism, right? And so they need some yes-byism or whatever we call it. Yes?
So I guess the question is, how could other cities duplicate in some way what Sue is talking about in Ventura?
Homeless Prevention Fund, not Homes for All, both of which are fabulous programs and should exist everywhere. Ventura Homeless Prevention started in 2007. It was started by the Ventura Social Services Task Force, which was a group of all the agencies that were working to end homelessness, and they saw a gap in what needed to happen, and they held a fundraiser. And the fundraiser raised like $20,000, and it got a whole bunch of houses of faith interested in supporting the program. We, to this day, get most of our funding from about 7 houses of faith in the city of Ventura, though, of course, we have individuals who support us, and every now and then we're lucky enough to get a grant. This year, we gave out $100,000 in rental assistance. And so how do you get started? I'm happy to help. We have we're a 501c3. I'm happy to share what we paid for as our, whatever you call them, incorporation, whatever. Just copy them, get it done. Happy to help.
Okay, any other, Maria? Any other thoughts? Sorry, I can't hear you.
The information she shared with the 2 different groups, can you send that out in the emails also?
Yes. Great, thank you. You mean the pink sheet that Sue handed out?
But she also mentioned a different group.
Well, right, okay. Great, okay. So Maria, you have some thoughts you might like to share. Okay, great. How can we help is really, I think.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things that we could do to help each other in this is really getting involved. I mean, we talk about NIMBYism, which does happen. I think that a lot of it is coming in and supporting city projects, like organizing, getting a group together. Like Sue said, Homes for All, I'm a member of that group as well. We just get together, we talk about the upcoming projects, and we try to be there as a counterforce against all of the waves of people just saying, you know, they don't want affordable housing. It's good for the city and our elected officials to hear that there are people who support affordable housing and who want people to live in our neighborhoods. I think electing elected officials who are staunchly for affordable housing, who do not go against development, is a big deal because they're the ones who make the decision, right? I think that getting creative in community is a good idea as well. So, for example, community land trusts are a way that we could try to create an organization that basically buys land and then subsidizes the housing that's on top of it, right? And those are things that exist, models that exist, that have been here. Actually, it was created in Alabama, but by African-American groups in Alabama. That's that model. It came from there. So, and it has gone everywhere. So community land trusts are a great idea that I really like. I think whenever you can, donating to organizations like the Ventura Homeless Prevention Fund, there's just a lot of things that we could do, but it all starts with community and being able to be together, right? And think a little bit outside of the box on what we could do.
Okay, thank you. Someone else? Oh, okay, okay. Come on now.
I'm Cappy Paulson. I'm with Lift Up Your Voice and Homelessness. I am on the Homes for All and Social Service Task Force 2, and the Faith Subcommittee. A couple things that we're doing that we need to come back to is the commons, the idea of the commons, rather than individual homes, that we all are responsible for each other. That needs to get back into society. That's one thing. And then also, I don't know how to do this, but people who own RVs, who live in their RVs, not the recreational RV people like me or Sue, but the folks who really live in their home, they need a safe place to have their RV and not be harassed by the police, and also maybe some services so to have that physical ground that they can park in, I think might be something to recognize, because that is their home. That is an inexpensive home that we're all talking about, and they're available, but there's no place for them to park, and they get kicked out when they do park.
Certainly experience, and I think it was mentioned a little bit earlier, showing up to city council meetings in a mass of people. They listen. If you write letters to them, if you send letters to the editor. So the people that are, the people who need to hear this are some of the city governments, the county governments, the people who will listen to you if they hear the people who are really involved and sharing that. But you have to have a lot of people. Just get as many people as you possibly can to show up. Okay, you have a suggestion.
All right, you pulled me into this. As a former elected official, I will assure you, it really does pay to show up. And that is one of the problems. I'm Carl Morehouse. I served on the Ventura City Council for 17 years. I was mayor from 2005 to 2007. Many of you know that I've been involved with the housing groups for some time, particularly the farm worker housing groups. We can't go around with SOAR and protect all this agricultural land, which is very important. God is not going to make any more of that. It does a very important job. But the people out there at 5 o'clock in the morning picking the strawberries and the other important crops are not white high school kids. I'm from Indiana originally. You spent your summers detasseling corn. There were some white kids doing that. And I have friends from the South. They used to pluck the tobacco stuff. But most of our people out here are not looking like me. And they need decent, safe, and sanitary housing. And you can't have them doubling up and tripling up and having unsanitary housing to live in if you're going to protect the ag land through SOAR. Now, there are a couple of other things that are going on. Besides, as you heard from Rick about supply and demand and others, with regards to supply and demand, when the Thomas fire hit, the city of Ventura only had a vacancy rate for apartments at 2%. A healthy supply is 5%. We lost 500 homes. Those people who got burned out, and I can say that many of them are friends of mine, and many of them signed the SOAR petition. Well, they lost their homes, and where did they go? They had the money, could take up the rental spaces. That pushed somebody out who couldn't afford it. We had no absorption rate. We had no new homes for absorption rate. So it shows us the vulnerability of not having enough capacity to absorb. Now, I know that there are also new people coming into our community and people who are saying we can't have any more housing, and this new stuff that's being offered is being sucked up by people coming from out of the area because they're anti-COVID and they want a small town. By the way, Ventura is not a small town. We just think it is. It acts like one, but we're not. So the idea is, again, you have to show up at the meetings and speak against a very well-organized now group, a very articulate and somewhat prosperous group who don't like change. I call them the party of no change. You see them wearing the red hat that says make Ventura great again. We're not going back to 1956 or 1964, but you have to be there and express your voice. There's another part of the community that's also screaming out because they don't like the looks, and no offense, Rick, to this, but the new housing, and you've seen it on Coastline and Ventura and others, the boxy look. I have pushed for some time saying we need new design guidelines so that you don't invade a craftsman-style neighborhood with a Frank Gehry-looking Disney building. It doesn't fit. So let's all say, okay, you can go in this neighborhood, but you got to look like the rest of the housing. You can be taller. You can have less parking because it's not going to need, seniors aren't going to need to drive, but it's got to look like it fits in. And there are a lot of architects who are not doing that, and some of them are friends of mine, and I understand why. But that's something else you have to push. But there has to be a voice. There has to be a voice that says that's what we need to do. And those other groups who are well organized and articulate and well funded are going to continue to show up. And if you're not showing up and organizing, then you're going to lose your chance to promote this kind of housing. So that's my additional thoughts.
So since Carl just told us all to show up, and we heard about Homes for All, there's also House Farm Workers Groups who does work with Homes for All, which is fabulous. There's 2 brochures up front. There was a question earlier about Camarillo, and I was a little thrown off, but you might have been asking about the SOMAS project, which is 360 units that's being built for farm workers. There's a whole map up front that shows you all of our current farm worker housing. So if you need something to show somebody on how much more we need, this is a great tool. There's also a brochure that tells you how to get a hold of me and how to join one of our city groups. We do have city groups monthly. Our Oxnard one meets on the 11th at 9 a.m. on Zoom. So if you're an Oxnard resident interested in affordable housing or farm worker housing and want to know how to show up or how to make a difference, you're welcome to join that meeting. Just email me and I'll get you a Zoom link. Thank you.
Okay, Rick. Whoops, excuse me.
Thank you, Betty. I just have one more thing to add. I had forgot to mention that there's a bill pending in the California legislature that would allow by right affordable housing development on church property. And that's very important. Now, this bill, this is like the third or fourth time it's been introduced. Cities are often against something like this because they want that local control. But this could open up a lot of opportunities for affordable housing development. Many Mansions is involved in a project on church property in La Cañada, Flint Ridge. And without this bill, it's going to be 2 or 3 years, a couple $100,000 to go through the zoning and entitlement process. But with the bill, that would really speed up development, and I think a lot more housing would be developed on, you know, areas that are being underutilized right now, with a population right here that could really be very supportive of the residents there. So I think that's something. So if that bill is come, you know, lobby your cities, lobby your legislature. I don't know. Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I recognize that we're running close, but is there someone else who would like to share? I think, Nan, you had something you'd like to share. Okay, great.
Briefly, because we are close on time. We have an opportunity right now, 2023, ARPA funds. The cities, the counties, the states have all gotten one-time monies from the American Rescue Plan. Is this not on? Okay. Yeah, why don't I do that? Okay, so we have one-time big bucks. Could you put up the slide and we could see what our cities are getting? Keep going. No, that's not it. This is yeah, here we go. Okay. All right. So these are very big bucks coming right now to the cities. Now, the cities have all done something with these bucks. They have a lot of flexibility. My city, Ventura, put most of it into the general fund, where it just sits there, isn't stimulating anything, isn't building anything. So we have an opportunity in all our cities to really go back to the cities and demand that they put significant funds into affordable housing. In the city of Ventura, the advocates supported the Housing Authority's request for $1 million out of the $16 million for affordable housing development. So the housing authorities in all our city pretty much have projects ready to go, and they just need the funding to get it going, to support it. So Ventura refused that $1 million request for housing. Instead, they put $1 million into upgrading the golf course. So yeah, no, we can't allow this, and this is, again, we need to get together, go to the city decision makers, either in public hearings or privately with them, and get some of this money for affordable housing. It's there. It can't be put into staffing because that's an ongoing expense. So putting it into affordable housing is ideal for this money. So thanks.
Yeah. Okay, just so I guess one of the questions for us all now is, so what's next? We'd like to invite you to a follow-up of this discussion. It will be online, on Zoom, and it will be on Sunday, January 29th at 2 p.m., and we will be convening as a housing justice work group. So if you'd like to be a part of a group like that, sounds great. Our intention is to meet with those of you who really want to affect housing policies in your cities, and so you can work together on next steps. We recognize that this is just really a beginning. We know we've got a problem. We have some possible solutions, but if we can gather together as a group of advocates for affordable housing, then hopefully we can make a difference. And I look at a group of people here is from all over the place in Ventura County, an opportunity for all of us to get together. And so maybe there's something going on in Oxnard and you need a bunch of people to show up. I'm a great boots on the ground person, so invite me to come to your event, and I'll be glad to put my boots on the ground and say a few words. So come on the 29th. It's on Zoom. You don't even have to get dressed. I mean, well, don't come. I'm sorry. You don't. The picture of naked people in front of Zoom does no. But you don't have to get dressed below the waist, whatever you would like to do. I understand that the sales of skirts and pants has gone way down since the pandemic. Excuse me. Yes, I have the script. Thank you. Nan is our mom. And I think I'm older than you are, but that's okay. So I'd like now to introduce the Reverend Melissa Campbell Langdell to talk to us about the religious perspective, our righteous action related to all of these issues coming from our religious traditions. Reverend Melissa is the pastor at the All Saints Todos Los Santos Episcopal Church in Oxnard and a CLU board member. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you so much. So housing justice, why would faith communities even get involved is the question that some people say, because this is seen as maybe not in our purview, right? Well, when we think this is a justice issue, in Leviticus 25, we hear about how in every 5th year, we're to seek justice for those whom society has left behind. According to Leviticus 25:9, a loud trumpet should proclaim liberty throughout the country on the 10th day of the 7th month, the Day of Atonement, after the lapse of 7 Sabbaths of years, 49 years. And so in this manner, every 50th year was to be announced as a Jubilee year. All real property should automatically revert to its original owner, and those who, compelled by poverty, had sold themselves as slaves to their brothers should regain their liberty. This is according to BibleStudyTools.net. Well, we do this for justice reasons, because this is actually part of many of the different Abrahamic faith traditions to see housing and other living issues as part of our faith to act on. Because no one should be housing insecure, not families with children, not older adults. We just recently had a vigil for the homeless people that had passed away in Oxnard and other parts of Ventura County. And one that died last year was 100 years old. Not veterans and not drug addicts either should be having to deal with housing insecurity. Those are diseases that need to be treated. We also need to do this to be good neighbors. The Golden Rule says to love one's neighbor as oneself. And this rule is echoed in some form or fashion in all of the major world religions. I think we even had an Interfaith Friendship Project presentation that reaffirmed this last year. And a good society is not just about serving our own needs or the needs of those on top of the totem pole, so to speak, but those who assist those in, or also to assist those in need. But the truth is also, as someone has pointed out to me recently, that working for housing justice really isn't about charity. And as was mentioned, this is something that touches all of our lives. This is not about helping the quote-unquote less fortunate. Yes, it is in part, but it's about building better communities for all of us together, something that all members of faith communities and those who are maybe agnostic but may approach this from a secular perspective would agree with. It's about building, respecting the value of every single person and family in our community. In September, our city manager presented to a group of our faith leaders about the need to invest in the local community colleges, particularly in Oxnard College, which has been significantly underfunded. He mentioned that if we have more skills training in the area and more job pipeline programs, we would have more jobs to bring more people into the area. And that's great. And this is very needed, but also we need to have the housing for those people that are in those skills training jobs in order to provide something for them. Even I, moving into the area as a professional, had a really hard time finding housing. Had to live in a hotel for a little bit. I was able to do that. But then when I did find a relatively affordable place to rent while I was looking for some place to buy, it was affordable just because I didn't know this. It was being foreclosed upon. So I learned all sorts of things about foreclosure law. Because this is an issue we all face, many of us, right? It's not just poor or homeless people that need housing, but folks across the board in Southern California. And we know that if we just focus on housing as a charity issue, the systemic issues that prevent many from accessing housing will not be addressed. There was an example recently in the LA Times in San Diego that they have changed the way they're doing their vouchers to make it so each neighborhood, they can actually provide a slightly different rental voucher based on the neighborhood, and that's created a lot of success in their area. Another success that we had recently in Oxnard is that our navigation center is finally getting built. Well, it's being built right next to our church, and it would have been very easy for our church to say, oh, this would really make it hard for us to find parking, and so forth. And there are a number of local community members, the small business owners, that were very concerned. Is this going to attract people that are going to disrupt our business? And we were part of that force that came to City Council and said, no, we do want this because we do want to be able to serve not just the homeless, because this is a homeless shelter, but also there's going to be 54 units of affordable housing on top. Will it change our neighborhood and make parking slightly harder? Yes. But it will provide the good of much more housing in a very dense area. We know that there's a history of redlining in our country, and access to housing has not been justly available to everyone. And it has been especially unavailable to African Americans and other people of color. We as people of faith must join together also from that aspect of the justice issue so that we can create access to affordable housing in Ventura County, not just because we want to be charitable, but because God calls us to be people who deal justly with others. As it says in Micah 6:8, He has told you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God. This is justice, but it's also kindness too. It's a kindness that's about changing the system for the better, a justice-inspired kindness that moves beyond charity and into action. We are called to be blessed community together, a blessed community in which all have dignity and access to housing they can afford. A blessed community is a truly diverse community, a community where people can find space for themselves and their families. Let us work together to make that a reality for Ventura County.
Thank you so much for those inspiring words, Reverend Melissa. So, in closing, I'd like for you to check up the address. The event is happening on the 29th. Information about that, be sure you put it in your calendar. And also, help us find a way to solve this problem. Now, Pastor Benjamin will close out. Oh, I'm sorry. We have one last poll. I forgot. And it's right there boxed in. I should have been able to see it. Cynthia.
All right, so we're on our last poll question. So for those who haven't taken their photo of their QR code, yes. Your last question is, what part of local housing justice work interest you the most? Lots of great answers. Thus far, we have 15 participants, and that list is growing for those that are attending. But I'll read off some of the answers. Preventing homelessness, supporting local organizations that are in place and doing good in this area, advocating in local government for funds to assist in the housing crisis, showing up en masse at city council meetings when multiple voices can make a difference, hands-on action to make a difference in Ventura County affordable housing, community land trust, a program for African Americans, advocating in local government for funds to assist in the housing crisis, affordability, making sure we all have safe housing. Let's get that ARPA money. Ensuring our youth have a chance to succeed and strive from the very start. Build more housing. I want to get involved with a project in Oxnard that is similar to the Ventura Homeless Prevention Program, involving the local church, the community land trust. And the responses are still coming in. Okay. All right, but I'd like to turn this back on to Reverend Betty. Thank you so much for your participation in the polls.
Thank you for helping us with technology. And now, Pastor Benjamin, would you please close us out? And we look forward to see many of you on the 29th on Zoom.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for coming, and we hope that you were blessed by this experience, and we hope that you got your wheels turning, and so you can find an area in which you can help us meet the needs of our people that live in Ventura County, and that's the whole goal of today, this afternoon. So if we could just bow your heads. Dear Creator, we thank you for this moment to share together and understanding the needs of the people here in Ventura County. And God, we pray that you would just give us a spirit of action to leave this place to do your will. Amen.
And please, a round of applause for Pastor community for housing us today, or about community housing.
Gibson, thank you.